So welcome in to Rooster Rant. As always, on Sundays after football games for the South Carolina Gamecocks, we get together with all you fine folks and to discuss the Saturday that was. As always, happy to have Alex Jones here with me. My name is Matt Anderson. We're the host of this show. So, Alex, Gamecocks went up to Lexington, Kentucky this past weekend. You were there, which is pretty awesome. I'm sure that it was a fun game to cover from a media perspective. But the Gamecocks won 31-6. We'll talk all about the game here in a little bit. But, Alex, just your general thoughts on the road trip and, what you thought.
Yeah, so second time being able to go to Kentucky as a member working for the Big Spur. Going up there for it was a fun game to cover just from everything that happened. We saw the offense. We'll get into all this later, but we saw the offense. I think take a step forward, and that defense is. especially that defensive line. Just took a next step. But it was a lot of fun to cover this game, and South Carolina's now 2-0, and there's a lot of anticipation for this game this week now.
So the big question I have for you, Alex, is I know you were there with Whittle. Where did y'all dine in Lexington, Kentucky, and on the road there and back?
So we actually didn't stay in Lexington. We stayed probably 2 hours out of Lexington, heading back this way. So, our photographer Ryan Bethea was there, and we all went out to eat on Friday night at the town we were staying in. But it's all I think there was one time the two years when we went there, we ate this nice Italian restaurant. So pretty much every SEC town you always have some good places to eat, and Lexington's no different.
Yeah, you and I were kind of texting back and forth before the game, and obviously it was a beautiful day for football. I don't think the weather could have been any better. And we were kind of texting about the crowd, and you said it was kind of a slow arriving crowd. But by kickoff, it looked like it was pretty full.
Yeah, it was a full stadium. I think, just being just the, as gray as the day as it was, I think it was like 64, 65 degrees at kickoff. Like, it was a great chance for everybody to come out and watch that game. And it was pretty good, pretty awesome atmosphere for about 3 quarters or so. And then when South Carolina started pulling away, it was a lot of South Carolina fans left in that stadium.
Yeah, it was you could definitely hear the Gamecock crowd on the TV and the Gamecock band too. Sometimes when ESPN covers games, they'll actually set up, microphones and stuff just randomly in the stadium, but it ends up being by the visitor band. I remember when the Gamecocks beat Tennessee a number of years ago, it sounded like the Tennessee band was right on top of you, but talking to folks that were at that game, it wasn't necessarily that loud, although Tennessee's band is loud. But no, I think you look at obviously last Saturday against Old Dominion and then this Saturday in Lexington, 30-degree differential of temperature at kickoff. And, for a team that has as much depth as South Carolina does, especially on the defensive side of the football, you can talk about wearing teams down because of the heat in Columbia, but there's also something to be said about your depth not getting worn down by by the degree of heat in Columbia. So I think that definitely played in the Gamecocks' favor. We're going to go ahead and give our overall takeaways. Let's start with the offense, Alex. What did you see? And, I'll give my thoughts here and we can kick it back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, I thought starting with Lenora Sellers, I think, you saw him be a little bit more comfortable in this game, and I think they helped him out. We kind of mentioned going into this game how they can help him out, how they need to help him out with some quick game stuff or just get a little bit of a run game going. And, I think they did. He looked comfortable and obviously dealt with a little bit of that injury where he was out for a little bit of time. And Robbie Ashford came in and pretty much, really, kept it going a little bit. He had to help get that drive going a little. So, I thought the Norris really looked just a whole lot more comfortable. I think that's expected going from week 1 to week 2, just have that one game under your belt. And, week 2 going into an SEC environment, I thought, honestly, for the most part, Norris was pretty impressive. He had the one interception, but, it's just the stuff you're going to anticipate happening with a freshman quarterback, not true freshman, but a first-year quarterback starting. So, I thought for the most part, I thought we saw the offense take a step forward in pretty much all facets in this one.
Yeah, for me, watching the game on TV, first half felt a little sluggish, a little out of sync. Obviously, the Gamecocks were winning 10-6. I will say it was a beautiful play call and decision making by Lenore Sellers on that first touchdown pass to Mazio Bennett. I've rewatched the game again. I still can't figure out how Mazio got that wide open, but just for Lenore's to have his back turned and turn towards Mazio and see him quickly and make that decision and get the ball over there for what was actually a pretty easy touchdown that didn't start that easy when you look at the play call. But outside of that, I thought that the defense really did kind of set the tone for the offense in this game. I think that when Lenore Sellers went out, it kind of messed up the game plan a little bit. I do think that Robbie Ashford was scheduled to get some plays, but to be thrust into that position, I think that sort of bogged down the offense. Kentucky allowed the Gamecocks to just run the ball if they wanted to. And, it was hit or miss in the first half. The second half, the running game kind of picked up. Rocket Sanders is just a guy where I think the more carries he gets in the game, it's almost like Derrick Henry. It might be 2, 3, 4 yards or, well, Derrick Henry and Rocket Sanders really don't get tackled for a loss. But then all of a sudden it's an 8-yarder, it's a 16-yarder, it's a 20-yarder as the game goes on. And I think that's a testament to Rocket Sanders and this Gamecock offense to trust what they know to be true. And just because it's a 2-yard gain, and I think Rocket only had like 5 or 6 yards rushing in the first half. I think he ended up with over 50 in the second half, and obviously the touchdown. So I think that a lot of fans have been griping on message boards about the offensive line still, but I think that it's like Novocaine. Like sometimes just give it time, it's going to work, and you just got to stay in the game. And that kind of takes us over to wide receivers. What'd you see at wide receiver? And if you want to talk about Rocket, I didn't give you that opportunity, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it was kind of funny on that one possession. He scored 3 times, I think. The one where they reviewed it, it said he didn't get in, then he got in, then there was a penalty. But, I think for one, if we're talking about the offense, I thought that was a pretty, impressive from those guys to battle through that because, they were so close a couple of times to get in there. Then, they just kept staying with it and didn't end up with a field goal and then found a way to get in the end zone. And that was a great run by Rocket. That was a physical run to get into the end zone. But, yeah, going to the wide receivers, obviously Mazio Bennett kind of I think stole the show in this one. He was really good, and you mentioned he was wide open on that one. And when you watch it, they just the defenders kind of followed two defenders went with one wide receiver and left Mazio wide open. And it was a great job by the Norris Sellers to kind of roll out and keep his eyes downfield. But I thought we saw Jared Brown kind of emerge in this one too. He showed some things. They showed got him in the ball in the backfield, kind of like they did last weekend. I think that went for about 11 or 12 yards again. And Shane Beamer tonight actually on the teleconference mentioned I think that they're most confident right now in Mazio and Jared Brown being those top two guys, and they're still looking to see who's going to kind of just take it and go. And but I think a few weeks now, when we get to maybe that first bye week, we'll have a really good idea of what this rotation is going to look like.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on our late night show as well, Alex, that really let's get through 3-4 games of the season, preferably 4. You're a third of the way through the regular season, see where things shake out, see even after 2 games. I can't tell you everything that this Gamecock team is going to be or not going to be. But
right.
Yeah, I thought the wide receivers looked decent. I still think Jared Brown gets open, and he needs to find a way to catch some of these balls, because he had one that popped off his hands, and not that it would have gone for a first down. I don't think it would have. It was third to the line of scrimmage on third down. I think it was like 3rd and 19. And then I still go back to that long drop he had on the illegal man downfield. That's just a bomb that has to happen if you have the opportunity to make that play. Tight ends, I will say that I think that they are pretty daggum good. You still haven't seen a lot out of Brady, but at the same time, Brady did have a touchdown catch called back on the fake field goal against Old Dominion. So Brady Hunt, Josh Simon, and then the freshman, Michael Smith. He is something impressive.
Yeah, I thought the tight ends played pretty well overall. They had a couple issues again in the pass blocking game, and I think there was some instances where a guy got by him and either got Dylan Norris or he did in the run game. But in the passing game, they were really good. That play call I thought that was a really nice play call that they had to that touchdown to Josh Simon, where they kind of faked it out to Rocket, got the linebackers out there, and Josh Simon snuck behind them. And I thought they pretty much, I think, turned in a solid game. Still got some things to clean up in the blocking, but I thought that was improved a little bit in this one, going up against a better defense as well. So, Michael Smith looks like he's continues to get comfortable. We're starting to see he's pretty sure-handed out there too. Like, he's pretty solid. And, I thought, we talked about, one thing to help Norris get comfortable in that game was get some quick routes to the tight ends. And we saw that Michael Smith had I think it was like maybe a 10-yard out route that they, converted and got a first down. So I thought overall tight end was a pretty solid showing, just still looking to improve in some areas, just like with the rest of the team, honestly.
Well, Michael Smith really impressed me just because of how heady he is. Just to be in the right spot when that ball popped out of Norris's hands on that blind side. That sometimes, the ball bounces your way, but you still got to be in a position to be fast enough to think and react and to do something with it. And that potentially, not, I want to say game changer, but it definitely would have shifted what was happening in the game if he had not picked up that fumble and even gotten it back to the original line of scrimmage. So, that Josh Simon catch for the touchdown, that's what Gamecock fans have been clamoring for, those types of offensive plays. And I saw on the message board today, and I can't remember which game it was either, but somebody mentioned that either Tennessee or Kentucky had run that exact same play against South Carolina before for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing when you have a Rocket Sanders in the backfield that the linebacker eyes have to be on. They have to see if he's getting the ball or not. And if there's an opportunity, just that split second freezes them. And Lenoris dropped a great pass to him. I still think moving on to offensive line, like I said, I think they play really, really hard. I think that sometimes, like on those 2 hits on Lenore Sellers, those back-to-back plays where there were fumbles. Thankfully, Gamecocks recovered both of them. But at the end of the day, that's 6 on 5. Like, it's hard to block 6 on 5. Or, you're doubling somebody. Like we talked about all last week, Kentucky's defensive line is really good. And sometimes you're going to have to double somebody. And when you double somebody and a mistake happens, well, there's an opportunity for a big play.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line, there's still some things in the run game specifically, or really that they got to get cleaned up. They, as you mentioned, they kind of got bogged down early on in that first half, and there wasn't much room for Rocket to run. But I think with the passing game kind of not maybe improving in that second half, I think that kind of helped open up the run game a little bit. And I thought, especially late in that game, they were kind of I thought Rocket really got going kind of later in that second half. So, I think the offensive line showed improvement. There's still some room to improve and still a lot of areas that need to grow. But I thought from week 1 to week 2, we saw a decent improvement there.
Yeah, and looking at the rushing stats, and I know it was mentioned last week, there were some sacks in both games. There were some kneel downs in both games that can mess with the yardages a little bit and the carry totals. But I was just bored today, and I wanted to see what the run pass ratio was for the Gamecocks so far. Alex, so far the Gamecocks have run 129 offensive plays. How many of them do you think are running plays so far?
You said 129?
129 offensive plays. How many are run versus pass?
75 to 80, somewhere in there.
So 90 running plays versus 39 pass plays.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense when you think about the Old Dominion game. Like they tried to get that run game going and were stayed consistent with it, and you saw that in the first half too. And I think even in the second half, you saw that passing game open up. So that number doesn't really surprise me now that you say that.
Yes, I mean it's a 70-30 split at this point, run versus pass. And one thing I will say before we move over to defense, Lenore Sellers had 7 carries from -4 yards. I almost guarantee you he will never have a negative rushing yard game again in his career at South Carolina. I think that's a one-off. Maybe it'll happen in a weird scenario where, I don't know.
A big play or something, a big negative play, but yeah, I don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, where he just runs backwards 30 yards like you used to play NCAA football. But I would be shocked if Lenore Sellers ever has negative rushing yards in the game ever again. Well, with that being said, Alex, let's turn our attention to the defense. I mean, A plus, almost all the way down. But go ahead and give me your take, and then I'll fill in some stuff on my end as well.
Yeah, I thought overall it was another solid performance by that defense. Kentucky had that one drive late in the second quarter where, I think it was like an all-run drive where they drove down the
18
field.
straight run plays.
Yeah, and they drove down the field and got in the field goal position. But, I thought after that drive they adjusted and, basically said, make Brock Vandegrift beat us. And they proved that, that wasn't going to happen. And, I thought defensive line is the talk, obviously, and rightfully so. Those guys were, especially on the edges, and really not just specifically the edges, the whole defense line was getting after Brock Vandegrift. And, I thought they made him uncomfortable and just did anything they could to get to him. And in return, that makes the secondary look really good because they're going up against Dane Key and Barry Brown, who are arguably 2 of the top wide receivers in the SEC. And I think Dane Key had a few catches, but Barry Brown was held, catchless. So, I thought that, that goes hand in hand with the defensive line getting after Brock Vandegrift, but the secondary played really well too. And, Beamer kind of talked tonight a little bit about the linebackers and how impressed he was with their performance. And they rotated a lot of guys in there. Freshman Fred Johnson got in some snaps early too. So I thought just overall it was a really, really good performance by those guys again.
Yeah, the defensive line, and I've said it to family, friends, just talking. I haven't watched every college football game this season. There's obviously different levels of competition that are happening all over the country, but I haven't seen a defensive line so far this season be as consistently disruptive as South Carolina's. I'm sure that there's some stats out there that might back up what I'm saying, but just from a pure talent standpoint and just ability to get bend and get around and crash that pocket and push people in where the linebackers can make plays, defensive tackles are all very, very good. I mean, they played violent football in Kentucky.
Somebody on the message board brought it up earlier about talking about Dylan Stewart's stats and for the first 2 games, and I think it's something like 6 tackles and maybe 2 or 3 sacks, and it doesn't do it justice for what he's done. Like, I mean, his stats are what they are, but like he's been so disruptive, and it's just been impressive. Like you see it catching on like people across the country. You look on social media, everybody's talking about the bend and that play where he was triple teamed basically and chased down Brock Vandegrift like that. I mean, that was unreal. But, I thought defensive line as a whole was really good and, was a big key in them holding Kentucky to just 6 points.
Yeah, and I don't know Kentucky's offensive line in and out, but excuse me, it was said on the broadcast that they were down an offensive lineman going into the game. They lost another offensive lineman during the game around halftime, but I don't think it would have mattered, quite frankly. Some of those guys on Kentucky's offensive line were all SEC last year. And Brock Vandagriff will figure out more about him, but watching them a little bit against Southern Miss and seeing Southern Miss get into the backfield and opportunities for Southern Miss to force some turnovers that they weren't able to capitalize on. They had some missed tackles, especially for some sacks. If Kentucky thought they were going to be able to get away with what they did against Southern Miss, they found out in a hurry. I mean, on TV, it looked like Kentucky was rattled. It really looked like their entire stadium was getting rattled as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I completely agree. I think, as you got into that middle of the third quarter, it became pretty evident that Kentucky had a long way to get back into the game, especially after Rocket Sanders scored. Like, you just kind of wondered if Kentucky had it in them in the passing game, because they're going to have to throw the ball to catch up to South Carolina. And, they hadn't shown that so far in that game that they're going to be able to do that. So I think that just continued to build confidence on that Carolina defense. And, I think Shane kind of talked about this last night after the game, that drive where Kentucky just kept getting backed up due to holding penalties. Like, it got to the point where Kentucky couldn't block them, and there was just a whole bunch of holding penalties. And they talked about how the confidence that gives you on the sideline, just that you're getting after the quarterback. And I think that was the true turning point in that game, where it just became obvious that Kentucky wasn't going to get back into that one, because that defensive line, especially in that drive, was just all over the offensive line and Brock Vandagriff.
Yeah. I agree with you. So I don't know if there's much more to say. Nicky Moore had an interception return for a touchdown. They had another pick later in the game. They were all hyped up. They were all fired up. Nick got a personal conduct penalty on him after the touchdown, but I think that was just telling Kentucky it was over, in my opinion. With special teams, I think Kai Kroger had his best game punting for the Gamecocks in a very long time.
Yep.
Alex Herrera making his field goals, making his extra points. Those are big things. Alex Herrera is now, I think, 4 for 5 on the season. He seems to split the upright almost every single time down the middle. So I think that the big thing for me, and tell me what you think, Alex, but Gamecocks need Kai Kroger to be this version of Kai Kroger, and then just get into manageable field goal distances. And Alex Herrera seems to have the accuracy and the leg to get it done.
Yeah, I thought special teams as a whole, taking in every unit was really good too yesterday. You're speaking of Kyle Kroger, averaging 51.6 yards per punt. I mean, it's pretty dang good, and completely flipped the field a couple of times, especially that one that landed. I think it was maybe inside the 5. I know it was inside the 10, but I mean, that was kind of that drive where we talked about earlier. But yeah, Kyle Kroger had a really solid day, and as you mentioned, one of his better ones in maybe 2 or so years that he's had. Alex Herrera, was on the money on his one kick. And I thought one of the bigger things in that game, special teams wise, is Kentucky, Barry and Brown is Kentucky's kickoff returner. And I thought the kickoff team was really good in that game. And they got down there, and there was a couple of times where they were getting about the 15-yard line or so. And with the way the wind was kind of blowing in that game, especially going that one direction, you're going to have some returns from both teams. And I thought they handled it really well against a really, really good returner. So, all in all, there was some – in that first game, there was, the block punt and some things they need to clean up, but it seems like Joe DeCamillis and that group really got some things cleaned up and turned in a solid performance.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get some coaching decisions here. I think that Mark Stoops, or whatever his name is, I think Mark Stoops, going for it on 4th down. I think that it was a boneheaded move. I think I understand why he did it. At that point in the game, Lenore Sellers had just gotten injured. I'm not sure if he's going to come back in. It's a statement. We're going to keep this drive going. We're going to go get points. And if we don't, we're going to make Robbie Ashford beat us with his arm to score a touchdown. I really do think that was what was going through his head.
Yeah, I can see it. It was just so deep in your own territory. You're putting a lot of risk on the line for that. And credit South Carolina's defensive line for stopping a quarterback sneak, 4th and 1, 4th and inches type of situation. We talk about turning points in the game. That was one of the first ones where South Carolina's got, a real chance to try to run away with this one if they can get some things going offensively. And, they ended up doing that.
Yeah, and look, I'm not saying I think it was the right decision. I'm just saying I think I understand what was going on in his head.
Yeah.
I don't know if he talked about it in his post-game press conference, but I will just say that any rational human being watching his offensive line getting dismantled and just going for it on 3rd and 2 and not getting anywhere, going for it on 4th and 1 was kind of a questionable call. I think the other turning point of the game, Alex, I think I saw you mention this on the Dig Spur, but drawing Kentucky offsides on the 4th down at the Gamecocks. I still think they were going to go for it. I think that they were trying to get Kentucky off, but I think the Shane was going to go for it. But that was the other turning point in the game, I think, in coaching decision-wise.
Yeah, I thought that was a great play because you bring in Brady Hunt there, and it looked like you were going to try to find a way to quarterback sneak it, and that was a great job of getting them off sides, and not having to run a play to get the first out. And I kind of agree with you there. I think they were still going to run it, but it turns out they didn't have to, and I think that kind of worked later on. That play kind of helped them later on because they did it again where they brought Brady Hunt in, and I think you probably catch the defense a little off guard because I think that could be coming again, but they ended up running a play out of it. So I thought that was a great play by South Carolina.
Yeah, and I'll tell you I'm cheating here a little bit because they actually showed Shane Beamer right before, like right after that third down, and you
Mhm.
saw him on his mic. We're going for this. We're going for it. Get a play. We're going for it. And so they called the play in, and it worked. Um, Outside of that, I mean, I think that Clayton White loves to blitz. He loves to bring pressure, and it seemed like he hit the nail on the head every time he brought it against Kentucky. And just,
Yeah,
I thought it was a great, great game for him. I thought Dowell Loggins gets a lot of credit for maybe baiting Kentucky into some things in the first half, and then in the second half taking advantage of it or making adjustments. I don't know
yeah.
which one it was, but
Yeah, and going back to the defense, one player we probably need to mention who had maybe a kind of sneaky good game was Vakari Swain, and
oh yeah,
he was one who didn't I can't remember the exact number of snaps he played against Old Dominion, but it wasn't many. But they rotated through those corners. O'Donnell Fortune was in there a lot, obviously, and Judge and Vakari Swain, but they rotated through those guys. But I thought all those guys had a good game, but Vakari Swain was the guy who really stood out. And I think he's the one who's going to see his snap count continue to rise.
oh yeah, and we'll talk briefly about this before we get to Shane Beamer's comments, both after the game and then tonight. But I honestly believe South Carolina had the opportunity to force 6, 7, 8 turnovers in that game against Kentucky, and the same thing happened against Old Dominion. I do think that this is going to be a team that Gamecocks win the turnover battle over the course of the season. It was one of my predictions to start the season, and
Yeah,
nothing has shown me they're not going to be ball hawks in every sense of the word. Kentucky put the ball on the ground 2 or 3 times in the first half, and was able to recover all of them. And I thought that could have been a turning point, honestly, if the Gamecocks had gotten some of those, or since they didn't, I thought that could have given Kentucky life, but we all know what happened at the end. So Alex, I know you just got off the Sunday night press conference with Shane Beamer. I will say that after the game, I thought Shane was very professional. I thought that he was very complimentary of his guys. The chatter on the message board is all about Shane talking about media and message board people and doom and gloom after Old Dominion. And, Shane does have a history of making these types of comments in press conferences, but I really don't think he intends it the way that it comes off. I think it's just more of, look, I'm trying to make you guys happy. See, I see what you're saying. And look, this is what we're trying to do. And it happened today. Like, I think he wants a
yeah.
pat on the back for the win. And honestly, his entire coaching staff and the players deserve a big pat on the back. And, 2-0 is 2-0.
Yeah, exactly. I thought he was fine, obviously, in all of his post game press conference stuff, and I think he was. It was just mainly, there's a lot of noise out there, and some of it was rightfully so with the struggles that they had in the first game, but I think it was just they didn't let it get to them, and just stuck to what their game plan was and stuck to what they knew was going to work, and ended up
Yeah, I think so too. I don't
working
know. I might
out
be glitching on my end, Alex. I don't know if
for
you're
him.
glitching, but
Tonight on the teleconference, we kind of mentioned a few things that I thought. Oh, yeah, can you hear me now?
I
You good?
can't. But just go ahead and keep talking. I think everyone else can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, I thought tonight on the teleconference, he kind of mentioned the physicality and the way they blocked and ran as the game went on. That's kind of something we talked about as we were talking about the offense. Or it kind of just felt like they just got better as the game went, and I think a lot of that was just the confidence that was building just from a defensive side. That I think the offense kind of knew that the defense wasn't going to let those guys score a whole lot of points, but I think they just kind of just wore down that Kentucky defense, which you really just didn't see coming just because they're a veteran led defense and really talented defense. But I think there's just a lot of a confidence thing with those guys.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with you. I think that everyone's going to be happy in a post game news conference and a post win Sunday night teleconference. And
Yeah,
obviously, the Gamecock players were celebrating in the locker room after the game. There were some amazing, fun social media posts that were sent out in the locker room and everything during the game. So, happy for those young men. But right now, Alex, you got to turn the attention to week 3, and in week 3, you have LSU coming to town. College game day will be in town for the first time in 10 years. It's a noon kickoff. I think college game day starts. The pre-show starts at 9, and the main show starts at 10 or something like that. And then, they'll go right over to the stadium at 12 o'clock for the game. So lots of excitement. I think there's just lots of joy. I mean, if you had told me that right after the Old Dominion game, there'd be this much excitement about South Carolina football and college game day would be coming to Columbia. I don't think there's not a single person on this planet except for maybe Shane Beamer that would have believed it, or maybe Shane's son. But at the end of the day, that's where Carolina sits right now.
Yeah, they always say it's a week by week business, and I mean you can see that this week. Like there's a ton of excitement coming off a big road win to open up SEC play, and then the news that dropped last night with College Game Day coming to town for the, as you mentioned, first time in 10 years. Like just adds to the excitement. It should be a pretty rowdy atmosphere Saturday afternoon for LSU.
And I think that's huge. I think it's huge for the Gamecocks because it's a recruiting showcase game.
Yep.
It's 12 o'clock. Kids can get there from, the surrounding states, get to be there for a little bit of college game day, maybe even come in the night before. You should have a great atmosphere. I think it's really good because college game day is there. I think the students will actually be there. Sometimes for noon kickoffs, the students kind of drag in, even for big games. I'm not sure what happened. I mean, I graduated from Carolina in 2010. I know you recently graduated, Alex. You might have more insight into why that happened. But with college game day there, I think the students will be there in full force. And that's a good thing because I don't think the students are going to leave to go to their tailgates at, for 12 o'clock game at, say, halftime. So excited about that. Excuse me, sure we'll get Alex back here in a second. But what the Gamecocks need to do offensively, I think that this 70-30 run pass split has got to change at some point. I'm not saying the Gamecocks need to flip it and go 70% passing and 30% running, but I think it'd be closer to 50-50, 60-40. Even I think 60-40 run versus pass split is pretty good. Blake says I'm breaking up pretty bad. Alex, maybe you can take it from here. I'm going to log in and log back out.
Yeah, and so talking about college game day coming to town and all that, I think it's it's going to be a huge recruiting show for South Carolina to be able to showcase the program and all that. I think that's going to be huge for recruiting. Just Shane kind of mentioned tonight on the teleconference. They had a lot of good guys already coming in, but now having college game day and coming off a big performance, that's going to be something that just brings more recruits to South Carolina. I think just as a program as a whole, having college game day come to your stadium is something that just it just shows what you're trying to build as a program, and I think that's what South Carolina is going to do. So obviously, looking ahead to LSU, this is going to be always going to be a challenge with LSU. It's kind of crazy how long it's been since LSU's been to Williams-Brice, but I think one of the bigger things when you look at LSU, they have a few injuries to key players that are, I think that are going to be something to watch, and obviously new quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, who I thought has looked pretty good. And it's a team that, last night they beat Nicholls State. I can't remember what the score was, but
it ended up being like 48-21 or something like that.
Yeah, it was close for a little while. I think maybe even mid-third quarter it was close, but, I think it's going to be I think the opening lines right. I just did a story on it. It's around 7.5, 8, maybe even 9 points right now. So I'm interested to see where that line kind of goes as the week goes on.
Yeah, I think that for me, this line is more of like 5.5. Kentucky. So, oh gosh, we are having all kinds of technical difficulties. I apologize for that, everybody. But yeah, where I was going with the offense, I do think they'll have to find a way for the Gamecocks to just start passing the ball a little bit earlier, get Lenore Tillers more in rhythm. I don't think that by design the Gamecocks want to run it 80 times to 20 times, 80-20 pass. But I think getting Lenore Sellers some opportunities to throw some deep bombs Clearly, he did have that interception against Kentucky, and he threw the ball up pretty high, but we'll see. I think that giving him a shot to really get the crowd going Saturday against LSU early, there's really no downside to it, even if it does end up in an interception. Guys, we're actually going to have to cut this show short tonight. We're having so many technical difficulties, but Alex and I will be back Tuesday night. At 8:00, you can find us on Late Night Gamecock Show. No idea what's going on with the tech on both sides, but we'll be back, and we appreciate you so much for listening tonight. When you listen, you give us the most valuable thing you have, your time, and it's never not appreciated. We hope to see you guys soon. Have a great evening.